and I'm very excited today that we've got Sam Kroonenburg joining us to tell his story and run us through his journey from zero to a very, very large acquisition in a pretty short period of time. For those who don't know me, I'm James. I'm a partner here at Airtree. I have done a lot of these in the past, but I haven't done one in a while, and there's a pretty good reason for that. I've been off on parental leave the last couple of months, running around after two little kids, trying to keep them alive. So far, successfully, but I'm technically still off on leave, but I wanted to make an exception today because I think this is going to be a really fun session. As always, please feel free to keep your videos on. I know there's a ton of people in New South Wales in clusterfuck of a lockdown, and probably want to see some people out there and connect. So feel free to keep your smiling faces on video. I think Zoom can handle it. As I think a lot of you will know, we did these quite regularly during the last national lockdown, and they really did turn into a bit of a support network for founders in particular. So given we're in a similar situation for a lot of us, at least at the moment, I did want to make, before we started, I did want to kick off with a bit of a call out around mental health. The strains and the challenges of running a startup, as we all know, for founders are extreme, and those challenges become even more extreme when life throws lockdowns at you. So what we did during the last set of lockdowns is pull together a bunch of the mental health resources that we use for all of our founders, that we give to all of our founders, and open source them. And I think Mel's going to be able to share a link. Yeah, she has already. Thank you, Mel. Which is a list of all the people that we've personally used or have had great recommendation from our founders. Professionals, everyone from clinical psychologists to crisis counselors to sleep coaches and pretty much everything in between, all come tried and tested and understand the nuances of strains and challenges that founders are under in particular. So if you do need any help in that respect or know anyone that does, please go there. And as always, the whole Airtree team's communication channels are all open. So if you need someone to chat to, do let us know. So with that, further ado, I am really excited today to welcome Sam to the meetup. Sam's the founder and CEO of A Cloud Guru, and I've been lucky enough to call Sam a good mate for many years now. And he's been in the you've probably seen his face around quite a bit recently. He's been in a ton of the newspapers, something to do with selling his company for a bit over $2 billion. And breaking a bunch of records along the way, including the largest ever acquisition of a private software business out of Australia. And all of that in only the space of about 6 years. So it really is the definition of a rocket ship. But I think even more importantly than that, Sam is really an extremely nice guy. As I say, I've known him for about 5 years now. I met him and his brother Ryan in London just as I was packing up my whole life and family to come back to Sydney to join the team at Airtree. And I've gone on record saying that I think he's one of the most genuine and humble and just downright kind people in startup Oz. That's not to say that all other founders in startup Oz are all assholes. It's the opposite. I think everyone's generally pretty good, but everyone I've spoken to that's either worked for or around or with Sam has always said the same things. He's absolutely outstanding in this dimension. And so it really is just great to see the nice guys do so well. So Sam, with that embarrassing introduction, thank you for joining the meetup and coming to chat to us.
Thanks, James. I am super embarrassed now.
You wait. We'll tell some more stories in a moment. But why don't we start? This probably sounds like a bit of a stupid question since your face has kind of been splashed all over the news for the last few weeks. But to be fair, up until recently, you have been a little bit under the radar in Australia, and that really belies your success as a founder. So there might be some people on this call that don't know a ton about A Cloud Guru. Why don't you sort of tell us a little bit about what the business does, and then we can come a little bit to your story.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, so at Cloud Guru, we are an online learning solution focused on helping both individuals and businesses get the skills that they need to move into the cloud. So very much focused on learning and education around the big market shift from moving IT on premises into the cloud. So on the individual side, we have like self-service online learning offerings, helping individuals get into AWS, Microsoft Azure, and Google Cloud, and ready them for really, some of the most lucrative jobs in the tech industry. And then on the business and the B2B side, we leverage that education to drive cloud transformation programs at scale for organizations who want to move their IT infrastructure into the cloud. But more simply, I think, our focus is just making learning and education engaging and interesting and exciting, and we do that a lot with hands-on learning, learning by doing, because when we started this business, we looked and we said, why does everybody hate training? Right? Most people find training really boring. It's like a chore. But actually, what we're teaching, the technologies that they need to learn are really, really exciting. So why can't the two be exciting and interesting? So that's really at the core what we're focused on. How do you make learning fun?
And rather than starting at the start, let's start at the recent history. What's the last month or so been like for you? You've been on a bit of a wild ride. I can't imagine you've had a lot of sleep over the last few weeks.
Yeah, it's been good. It's a super emotional thing, selling your business and going through an acquisition. It's an interesting personal journey to go through, but it's been really good. It's just when you go through an acquisition, you're before the thing closes, because when it needs to be approved by regulators and needs to go through a bunch of government regulations. So you have this period, a couple of months leading up to that, where you've announced it, people know about it, but it hasn't happened yet. And so you're readying your team and you're readying your staff for it. But you can't really talk to the other side legally. You can't collaborate in any way. So it's this weird kind of limbo state that everybody's in. And then you hit the close date and then you're on the other side of it. And then suddenly it's like everybody's scrambling to get the teams together. How do we bring these companies together? How do we collaborate? And so it's been really, the last couple of weeks have been a huge crunch, just everybody getting together. But it's been absolutely fantastic. And the Pluralsight team, Pluralsight's the company that acquired ACG, have been absolutely fantastic to work with. And it's been
I know the feeling. I remember when you first told me that this was happening and you swore me to secrecy, so much so that I couldn't even tell the team or my family. I was just itching to be able to tell people.
You don't tell your family. I'm my wife would kill me if I didn't tell her things like that.
It was I kept it under my hat. You'll be fine. But let's go back. We'll come back to that bit, because I think that there's some fascinating stories there. But I want to go back to the start, because I know that every great founder has these sort of origination mythology around the start of their business, and I think you guys are no exception to that. Talk us through a little bit about how you got started 6 years ago and how it came to be.
Yeah, so I started business with my brother Ryan, and both our background is generally IT. So he was more in the IT infrastructure space, and I'm more from the software development space. And we're both living in. I'm in Melbourne. He was in London when we started the business, and we both saw the same problem from different angles. So he being in kind of infrastructure IT, saw that the writing was kind of on the wall. Cloud was disrupting everything that he did and was a potential threat to his career longer term. And he thought, hey, I really want to get into this cloud thing and go with the new wave. And he decided to try to get a job with Amazon Web Services. If you can't beat them, join them, kind of thing. And so he went through that. And so through that interview process, he found it really, really hard to get good education. So most of the training out there was like, it was like, hey, yeah, you just take a week off work, spend a few £1,000s, and we'll give you this training that's, probably about 6 months out of date from what the cloud actually is today. So he found that really difficult. And then he went through this 3-month grueling interview process and got turned down at the final round to join Amazon, and was really pretty despondent, but thought, hey, at least out of this, I can take all the notes that I made from learning, and maybe I can turn this into an online course. And so he did that, and he put it up on udemy.com back in the day, and put this course up, not really thinking it was going to be anything. And it started getting a lot of traction. A lot of people wanted to take it and learn Amazon Web Services and get their certification. At the same time, I was working here in Melbourne for a software consultancy firm, and I was kind of like I was a development manager running a development team, and I was hiring in graduates at a graduate program. And I noticed that these grads were coming in, they were super bright. They had 4 years of university education, and they really had very few industry applicable skills, didn't know what the cloud was, had never touched it. And so I was seeing the education problem from a different perspective. And so I remember when, talking to Ryan, and, we had this, I still remember the phone call, to be honest, standing in my front room here in Melbourne, and had this call, and he's like, yeah, like we've had like thousands of people taking this course now, and they really like it. And we saw it from a couple of different angles, and I thought, we just said, hey, there's something in this, right? The people, training is not aligned to the needs of industry, but it can be. And I think the way that we do that is like, what if we could build a school for industry, by industry, if we could have hundreds of thousands of people on it, all contributing back, like basically crowdsource the feedback for like what's out of date in the training, what needs to change, what they want to see, use all of that as inputs to then constantly iteratively improve the education in the same way that, kind of like agile software development, right? And so we had this kind of grand idea to build this school and build this community of cloud professionals to do this learning together. But then the problem was time, and I had been trying to build a startup for the last 2 years, and I had launched this thing, and it just hadn't worked. And I had spent nights, weekends, everything on this thing for about 2 years, and I was burnt out. My wife was sick of not seeing me. We had young kids, and I remember having a conversation with my wife. I got off that phone call, and she said, like, you seem really amped about this idea, like this, and I'm like, yeah, I really think there's something in this. And she's like, you should build it. I'm like, well, I can't, like, when am I going to find time to do this? And we had a family holiday booked. We were going to take a few weeks out, and it was the first time we'd ever just gone on holiday, just us with the kids and not any of our other family who live all over the world. And she said, hey, we'll let's give up the holiday. We'll go live with my parents for a few weeks, and you build this thing. And I was like, I can't do that. Like, she's like, I remember she said to me, if you don't, and this could have been something, you'll always regret it. Like, we can take another holiday. And so we did.
That's the first time I'd heard that part of the story, Sam. And we say this a lot on these meetups, that the true heroes to all these stories are friends and family that are supporting founders, especially in those early days when that's the most uncertain. That's fantastic. I also have always loved the whole idea about the fact that this multi-billion-dollar business was built off the back of your brother Ryan being rejected from an AWS job.
And what's so funny is that early last year, we went to Amazon's internal kickoff. We got invited to, and their internal kickoff is like a 20,000 person conference, right? That's their internal meeting. And we were invited along, and we had a booth there, and it's all Amazon staff. And there was literally a line. It was like 100 people long, a line of people to meet Ryan at the booth and get a selfie with him. I'm not even joking. It was 100 people long. And every single person said, thank you, I got my job at Amazon because of you. And I pulled him aside and I said, the irony of this is so ridiculous because you didn't get the job, but all of these people did.
and they're a massive customer of yours now. I won't disclose how much they're paying, but it's probably the most expensive decision they ever made was not hiring Ryan and having him in-house. And you guys, your brothers starting a business together is a big call. And Airtree's got a strange quirk in our portfolio. I think we have probably the highest proportion of startups that are founded either by siblings or spouses. I think at last count, it was about 20% of our businesses, including some of the real high flyers, Linktree and Canva and yourselves. What's it like? What's that decision process like when you're starting getting into business with your brother, who you obviously know so well, but you might not have those same sort of boundaries that social norms dictate.
Yeah, it's funny because I always say that, you shouldn't mix personal and work, and, you should try to keep a distance. But of course, it's always a little bit hard for me to push that inside the company when I founded it with my brother. But it actually has worked incredibly well. I actually think it brought Ryan and I closer. We've lived on the other side of the world from each other for many, many years. And when we started the business, now we're talking every day, every night. So I think it brought us closer. I think the formula for success with us is the fact that we're very, very different people and we have very different ambitions. And so we were able to divide and conquer. Like Ryan's really interested in like the teaching side of things, engaging with the customer base, being out there as the face. I'm much more interested in the originally building the tech stack, and then running the business, and managing kind of the internals of the business. So we kind of divided and conquered in a way that was really fruitful.
Yeah, I think the differences between you guys worked really well in your advantage in this business, for sure.
Yeah, and I've heard stories from other brother founders or sibling founders where that's not the case, and it's much harder, and it can hurt the relationship. So I think it really does. Like, I don't think there's any rule for this.
And you guys are also from Perth, which is the fun fact there is that we've backed two startups run by founders coming out of Perth. One is a little startup called A Cloud Guru, and the other is a little startup called Canva. So it's a pretty good hit rate.
Really?
Yeah.
All the founders from Perth?
Mel's from Perth originally. In fact, it was started in her mum's front room in Perth. So we've got a good hit rate backing founders from Perth. So if there's any founders from Perth on the line, hit us up. VCs are, if anything, all we rely on is pattern recognition. So that's a good 2 from 2 is a good pattern. So moving on. So when I first met you guys, I think probably a year after you'd started, and even then, it was pretty clear that you were growing like a weed. In fact, I think it was probably some of the most explosive growth in the early years out of any startup I've worked with.
A weed?
A weed, a good weed.
Be a better analogy than growing like a weed. Rocket ships,
Rocket ships, it feels overdone. Let's go with rocket ship. But either way, we talk a lot about in our world about product market fit, and I am very conscious, and many founders have complained to me the fact that this term that people use of art, that people are just supposed to know what it means, really has no real meaning. You sort of just know it when you see it. And I've never seen a more clear example of sort of knowing it when you see it than with you guys. What was it? You were much closer to this in the early days, obviously, than I was. What was it about it? What were the signals early on that you really felt like you had something that was growing quick?
Yeah, and I think when we started the business, we were not in the kind of startup community. We didn't know all the terms. I didn't know the term product market fit, right? But ultimately it was, do people want to buy what we have? And that's what we were really focused on. And it's funny, when you look back at the first 9 months or so of the business, what we did, I'm not sure I think, we did do it intentionally. I just didn't really think about it as a framework. But what we did is we devised a series of basically low effort tests to validate product market fit. So if you think of just launching the first courses on Udemy, that was a low effort test to see if there was appetite for this, engaging, exciting model of cloud education focused on certifications, and put that on Udemy to access an existing marketplace, existing audience, and with a platform that's there and ready to deliver. And so we got that low effort test, build the course, see if the audience are buying it, and then listen to what they're saying. That obviously worked. And then the next test was, hey, well, what if we make another course on another certification? Like, is there hunger for something more than just this one piece of learning? And absolutely saw that, big hunger for a kind of a full suite of training offerings. The next thing we did is what we said to ourselves is will our customers buy something from us directly, right? Would they actually come to us directly and buy something? So the first thing we did is we built a mobile app. but we built, I got like an off-the-shelf rapid development tool for mobile that I built the app in 3 days, right? 3 days. And it was for iOS and for Android, because it was one of these off-the-shelf kind of packaged tool sets that would make it all for me. Yeah. And it worked incredibly well. And so we built this practice exam app. So the theory was, hey, if people are studying to get their Amazon certifications, they're going to want to study, like revise for those tests, on the go, on the train, on the bus. So let's make a mobile app so they can study for those, practice the exams. So built that in 3 days, put it on the App Store, and within a week or two, that was making thousands of dollars a month, right? And so that was kind of the next test. Okay, they will buy something from us directly. And then the next big test for us was, the big question was, okay, but will they buy the courses from us directly? Will they buy our courses somewhere else? Will they go away from where they're buying it now? Can we attract people to buy us from us directly? And so that's when we decided to build the platform. And again, low effort tests, it was like 3 weeks, give up the holiday, build the most rudimentary thing that you can that will deliver a training course, and take a credit card, and connect a community. It was like, what is the very the core nugget of the thesis behind the business? Community that come together, do learning together, all focused around cloud. And then we launched that, and that just kind of took off like a rocket from there.
Were you back then, were you thinking about it in terms of tests? I mean, you're using sort of the terminology and the thought process that we suggest a lot of founders use in those early stages, but were you just sort of fumbling around in the early days, or were you sort of very methodical about what you were doing?
Well, it was intentional, but I wouldn't say like we framed it as we're going to devise a series of, low effort tests. It was like, okay, this is working. I've often called it in the past, follow the path of success, right? You try something, it works. And then you think, what's the next thing that makes sense from here? Right. And it's kind of like the branches of a tree, and you might try 2 or 3 other things. One of them works, you follow that, then you try again. And so you follow like everybody always says, failure, we should celebrate failure. Failure is, fantastic. What are your biggest failures? And certainly failure shouldn't be something you're afraid of, but I think success is the thing that should guide you. Right.
Yeah.
That's really where founders should focus. What's working, what worked, what's next.
And it really was self-evident in those early days. We've got in fact, I think I've shown you this this chart, Sam. I think actually John, my partner, might have shared this on Twitter recently as well. That's sort of a chart of the companies in our portfolio that got to their first 10 million in ARR, and the time it took to get there. You guys are sort of that first line with a bullet, almost twice as fast as just about anyone can. The link tree included. It really was a incredibly rapid adoption. And I think what was really interesting about those early days is that I remember certainly when we were speaking to you about the funding, that you were having conversations with other investors who probably looked at you and thought, AWS training courses, that feels a bit niche. And of course, by now you are much bigger than that. But the cloud has certainly turned out to be much bigger than any of us thought, and certainly cloud training has. But what was the point where you sort of went, shit, we've got something that's a hell of a lot bigger than just AWS training courses. This can be something really big.
Yeah, I think probably 2 points early on. So funny story. When we went to launch the website, so that last test I talked about, can we build a platform that people come to directly? We already had a website at http://acloud.guru, but it was literally like a landing page that just said that we exist, and there was nothing you could do there. And that had been up for a few months. And so when I went to launch the first version of the platform, the plan was to do a private beta. We're going to be exclusive. We're going to put a rope around this, and we're going to learn from, we're going to get some influencers to join, and we're going to learn from them. And so we put but in launching it, I put the site up at acloud.guru without the private beta gating, because I didn't think anyone would go to the site, and people started signing up and buying the product. And so accidentally we had our first few customers, and we started getting a few a day. And so Ryan and I talked to him like, what, this is great, why would we stop this? Let's go for it, right? So that was a big moment of okay, we've got something here, people are already buying it, we haven't even told anyone about it. So that was one. And the second one was when we landed our first major enterprise deal, which was Capital One Bank in the US. We'd had B2B deals before that, but that was our first kind of big enterprise deal.
I remember that well. That was the big shift, and that was a big bet for the early days there. Can you shift from this B2C model into this B2B model? And I think one of the we had this conversation a lot internally with the partnership, because that was really a live debate when we first met you. But I think a lot of what we focused on in those early days was the community that you built around it, and around the B2C product in particular. And I think it's funny that you mentioned the anecdote about the AWS kickoff and Ryan getting all those selfies. It reminded me of I don't know, I think you might have been back in Australia by then, right? I think I was having dinner with Ryan in London at some point during the years, and we were at a restaurant. It wasn't particularly fancy restaurant, but someone completely randomly out of the blue came up and asked for a selfie with Ryan. And if anyone knows Ryan, he's a massive space nerd. He's probably the biggest fan of SpaceX I've ever met. And at the time, he was wearing, I think, both a SpaceX hoodie and a SpaceX cap. Mm-hmm. And so my first thought was, shit, someone's confused this guy for Elon Musk and has come up and asked for a selfie. But turns out, no, it wasn't that at all. He mentioned Ryan by name and thanked him for helping him pass his AWS certification. And I remember that was the point where, for me at least, where the penny dropped. I was like, holy shit, these guys have built something that people really love in a niche, but in a massive niche, and the community is real. How did that, in the early days at least, fuel your growth, and in particular, how does that translate into going from that B2C model that you started with into the B2B, which you're much more dominant in now?
Yeah, and Ryan is a giant space nerd. But he sent me a picture yesterday 2 days ago from Starbase in Texas. He went down to where Elon Musk is building the massive starships, and you can literally drive straight up to them. It's incredible. Anyway, yeah, I think, the key thing, so I think your question is really around community, right? Like, how do you build that buy-in with the community and then translate that into, business outcomes? Yeah. I think the crucial point is that we weren't an existing set of educators or trainers sitting there with a plan saying, how do we attack the cloud computing market? How are we going to break into this? We were cloud engineers. Like, we were the target market, right? And we were already part of that community. And we were coming at it from the perspective of, how can we improve the way that people like us learn cloud computing? Like, we saw the problem, and we were in that community, and we were part of the space, and we formed a business out of that community rather than coming from the side and trying to work out how to, be genuine with that community. And so we hired, like, all our first hires, all of them were people in that community, right? And so everybody got it, and everybody got the problem, and everybody knew how to talk to this group. And then we just worked really, really, really hard with the community for a long time. So I would go and blog. I would go and speak, but I would write blogs. I went to we all went to every meetup we could, every conference that we could, and gave speeches. I went to meetups. Like, I got on a plane to Dublin to go to a meetup from Melbourne. I spoke in Brisbane, and off the back of that speech, a few months later, I met a guy on Twitter who had been at that speech, who ended up then becoming our head of product and engineering, and helped us build the business right through to today, and runs a 150 person organization, but it was off the back of going to that meetup. And so there were a lot of things that happened off the back of all of those community engagements that we did really, like, very intensely for the first 2 years. And some of them went absolutely nowhere. And it was really hard. Like, I always had that tension of, like, do I go? Like, is this going to be worth it? Like, I went to New Zealand for a meetup, and I don't think anything ever came of that particular one. And we would always have these debates. Is it worth going? But when I look back, I turn around now and I look back at the map of all of the incredible connections that led to this hire, that then led to this deal with this company. A lot of them came from those very early days. So I think it's about, yeah, if you want to build a community business, your team have to understand the community, be a part of the community, not just try to engage with it. And have some causes that you can champion in the community.
And that's been a real sort of a great foundation for you as you then went to move into selling these multi-million-dollar enterprise-wide deals, because you always had that to sort of fall back on, but also build social proof around. And I really want to sort of dig into that, because I think there's a lot of founders here that are trying to figure out how to sell their first, big enterprise B2B sale. But before we do that, the other big transition that you went through that I know a ton of founders on this call will be thinking about or going through themselves is how to build a business that is genuinely globally facing out of Australia. And in your case, your first big step was into the US. You're now 700 people and sort of all over the world. But your first big step was into the US. Can you tell us some sort of war stories or some sort of practical tips for anyone who's making that first venture into setting up teams over there and getting first customers out in the US?
Yeah, I found this super daunting at the time. Like, how do we do this? It was kind of annoying because we were international. We're an international company from day one, but we weren't in the country we really needed to be in to grow our go-to-market, which was the US. So I would say we approached this with like starting with the question, what do we want? What are we trying to achieve by going to the US, right? And ultimately, we wanted to build go-to-market workforce and capability there that was close to what was about 60% of our market, our customer base. And when we thought about the expertise that we wanted to be able to hire, we realized we needed tech talent with SaaS expertise, right? And then off the back of that, enterprise SaaS expertise, because that's where we really saw the future of the company going. So, we were consumer wanting to go into enterprise. And when we looked at it, we realized so we ended up setting up in Austin, Texas. And Austin had a really, really good mix of SaaS companies playing in the enterprise space. There was enough of them that there was a really good available pool of talent. There'd been enough kind of maybe 5 to 10 really great businesses built in that town in SaaS. And then, a few dozen others that were doing well. And so you find like when companies really break out and succeed in a space, they train a whole workforce in that area. And then when
how many enterprise customers did you have at that point when you first started thinking, all right, I'm going to set up a team locally in the US?
Well, that was 2017. I couldn't tell you. It would be we would have had maybe 100 or so B2B customers, but actual enterprise, it would be, probably would have been, I don't know, 5. Half a dozen.
You had some, you were sort of pulled in there, I guess, by your US customers, which is what I'm trying to get at.
Yes. The US customers were pulling us. There was they wanted more and more, but we needed a way to build a scalable enterprise focused workforce, and it just made sense for that to be in the US because that's where probably 70% of the demand was coming from.
And you settled with Austin, but did you look at other places? Were there others that were sort of close to the top of the list?
So we did a tour, right? We said, okay, what do we want? These are the requirements, what we want from a town, from a location. We went to LA and we went to Austin. We looked at some other cities, but we ruled them out. And yeah, we did a tour. We drove around. We hired a party bus with neon lights because it was we realized the day before we got to Austin, we were sitting in LA airport and we were like, oh, there's like 10 of us. How are we going to actually get around Austin and look at all the suburbs if we're all in different Ubers? And so we're making these frantic calls from LA airport, and we found one place that had something available was a full-on party bus.
No, with like those pole dancing poles and everything in the middle of it.
The flashing lights, the neons. Yeah.
I've got this great image of you all sitting on your laptops trying to get the business off the ground in the US, running around with the music in the background.
And then it broke down. But anyway, I won't get into all that. Yeah.
And so,
yeah.
you land in the States, and you're obviously over there. Who are your first hires in the US? Who do you and where do you go?
So we focused on. We knew that what we wanted to grow out of the States was sales, marketing, customer success, finance, and eventually people and culture. And so we looked at that sphere and we said, hey, what we need to start with is a chief operating officer. And I can't recommend this enough, like hiring a single functional leader to oversee the presence in that location. And that was just game changing for us because we weren't there most of the time, right? The time zones are different. And that was a guy called John Meachin, actually used to work he's an American guy, but used to work for Campaign Monitor in Sydney back in the day. And his background was finance. And so we brought him in and then he hired out our first finance hire, VP of finance out of Austin called Kevin. And the great thing about that is that Kevin had lived in Austin for, most of his life and knew Austin inside out. So he knew like, where's the best place? Like, where do people actually where are you going to be able to attract talent? What are the parts of town where you can open an office that is low rent enough that people will still want to come to? And all the nuances, like there's just funny nuances, like Austin, like parking is an important issue for employees, like, because parking is really challenging, and having that local knowledge, that local person to say, hey, like we need to do something about this. That's super, super helpful.
It's interesting that you went straight for the COO in the States. I think a lot of people, their first thought is let's go hire a VP sales or a CRO or a North America VP sales at least, and then sort of backfill with operational support to get there. At what point did you hire your first US-based salesperson?
We had a couple of salespeople in the US that we had hired, and then we hired a VP of sales probably in 2018. So probably about a year after our Series A, early the next year anyway. And that's when we hired our first sales leader to head up sales. But originally we had kind of a disparate band of salespeople working in London and the US, and our COO was overseeing that.
And as you were sort of flying around to all your various outposts in those early days, how did you personally deal with managing distributed teams and getting everybody sort of singing from the same song sheet?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably a boring answer, but I think having a culture of documentation and asynchronous communication is really key for a global company. You just can't solve everything on a synchronous Zoom meeting because there aren't enough hours in a day. So our head of John McKim, who I mentioned earlier, product and eng, he has a saying which is meetings are for the transformation of information, not the transmittal of information. I really like that. Transmitting information is about documentation. That's about when you set up a session, when you set up a Zoom, there should be a pre-read. Everyone should know why they're there. They should have read the information ahead of time. And then that you use that rare time that you have together in those time zone overlaps to really transform your ideas and move things through to the next stage.
There's probably a lot of founders out there now who are trying to set that US customer base up, at least now, who are finding themselves, for obvious reasons, now stuck in our little island. What obviously would have been a huge challenge if you were in the middle of this. What sort of tips can you give for people who are trying to do this remotely in terms of hiring and setting up teams and presence in the States?
Yeah, I think having someone on the ground who can be your eyes and ears, like I said, to really drive, like you're not going to be able to drive a lot of great hiring of leaders over there only through Zoom, like without someone on the ground. Especially that's been different the last year, but I think moving forward, as the US is really opening up now, you're going to want someone to represent locally, and so I think that works has worked. That worked incredibly well for us. And then I flew back and forth, most months, right? And we just be able to come in and be pre-planned and be productive for, a week or 2 weeks. And yeah, I think just setting up the company to work from day one, entirely remotely is important. Like if even to the point of like, I find it jarring when you get on meetings and everyone's in a room except 2 or 3 people who are, face on a Zoom. It's very hard for the people who are on the Zoom to connect with the people who are in the room because they all are very far away. They're hard to hear. So really being thoughtful and inclusive around your remote workforce, I think, is important.
I know that feeling very well. I was on a call at 4 a.m. this morning, a US based board meeting, and there were 3 people dialing in, 20 people in the room for the first time in forever. And I just remember just how difficult that is. But now that you've got, you're over, 700 people now, somewhere around there?
About 600, yeah.
600?
Although now we're part of Pluralsight now, so we're much more than that.
But the up until that acquisition of it, the center of gravity has always been here in Australia, in Melbourne, which I absolutely love that you've managed to, despite having a huge global footprint. HQ is very much here, and the core decisions were decision maker, yourself and the CEO, and a lot of your core team were here. How do you've been very public about the importance of Australia creating big winners and not having to move everything to the US. What were some of the advantages on the one hand of building a cloud guru out of Australia, and then what were some of the challenges that you had on the way?
So advantages, I would say, historically anyway, salary is a little bit lower in the US for like product and engineering and some of those than some of the major hubs in the US. So that was a bit of an advantage, but it, not huge. And I think just having a more global and diverse workforce from day one in how we approach problem solving and the ideas that you bring to the table is helpful for any company. Like I think US companies that start in the US sometimes can have the disadvantage of being too US focused from day one because they can succeed entirely in their market and never have to go global, right? Or they can do very well the first few years without having to think about that. Whereas we had to be global focused from day one. And I think arguably that helped us drive faster growth. Because we could hit all markets. But honestly, James, I don't think there are that many advantages to being in Australia, right? And I don't think we should kid ourselves about that. I think it does make things harder to crack the US and Europe, but that doesn't mean it's not possible and that we shouldn't do it, right? I love Australia. I want to live here. I want my kids to grow up here. That's why I never wanted to move. I've lived in the US. It's a great country, but it's not where I'm from, and it's not what I wanted for my family. And so I think we need to have a thriving tech industry. And I think, like I said before, the more winners that we have here, the more thriving it will become, because every big winner invests back. It builds talent and it builds resources and it invests back in the community. So I don't think we should kid ourselves. I've heard some people say like, oh, Australians are more entrepreneurial or, X, Y, or Z. It's like, no, like, let's be real. Like everybody's working really hard, and it just means we have to work a little bit harder. I would say in terms of challenges, the US system is complex. Starting a company there and trying to navigate benefits and medical coverage and all of that is just daunting for a founder the first time. I still remember that time when I think they were on a call with me and they said, so what do you want to do if one of your staff members, gets like something like blindness caused by diabetes? Are we going to cover them? And I was like, why are you asking me these questions? Why am I making this decision?
It's a great point though. Is that why having a sort of a COO who had done some of this in the past?
Definitely. It's like, hey, there's these firms that handle this for us. Let's engage one of those. Let's outsource there's all these different models, and depending on the size and scale of the company, that are most effective to adopt and meet your employees' needs. So, and I'd say the Aussie tax system is not completely aligned to the US tax system as well. Options are treated differently here. There's a lot of nuance in like share sales and things you have to really consider, and just be ready from day one. So I would, any entrepreneurs on the call, any founders, like pay to get the right advice, pay early, spend the money. It's worth it. You want advisors and firms around you in Australia that understand international accounting and tax rules. That's super.
And we've done it. We've done a few sessions on exactly that, Sam. We've had Glenn from PwC, and I think we've got Ken Heimarsh as well from Crestone, talking about ways that founders can think through their tax planning and their sort of wealth management from the early days, so they don't run into trouble zones. Right. So I'm sure Mel will be able to add some of those, but it's a really great call out. Just switching gears a little bit, because I really wanted to cover the people side of things, because I think one thing that just keeps coming back from anybody who's worked with you is that the culture at Cloud Guru is just so strong, and you hadn't run a big organization before, so a lot of this stuff you were sort of learning as you went, as always, people are the core of everything that any startup does. What have you learned about keeping culture, especially when the team gets so big and distributed as you have? How do you keep culture high, positive and engaging, and then how do you marry that with keeping hiring pace and quality of hires strong at the same time?
I could talk about this for hours. So I'm going to try
you got 10 minutes.
How to answer this very quickly. So we invested in culture early, like super early, earlier than even like I was comfortable with. I remember when I hired my COO out of America, he's like, okay, we need to get someone to head up people and culture. And I'm like, we've got like 25 employees, why are we focusing on this now? And he really pushed me, hey, like we're going to need to be able to hire. We're going to need to make sure we're hiring the right people. We're going to need to gear up for fast growth. And it was the best, probably one of the single best decisions we made in the business. So we hired
how big were you when you hired your P&C?
25 people.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's pretty early. But we could see where the growth was going and we wanted to be ready. And that really laid foundations for our global growth. So we hired in Sarah Zabukovic, who actually is ex-Airtree.
Yep. She was our head of talent for a long time, and then we were gutted that she wanted to move down to Melbourne with her partner, and so plugged her into you guys, and she's never looked back.
Sarah is awesome. She's just been such an incredible partner to me in building this business. So, she really pushed me to codify our values early. She could see we had a great culture in the team, and, she was being thoughtful about, well, how do we scale that and how do we not lose it as we grow? So I think codifying values early is super important, and not like spend time on it. It's really, really hard to codify your values. I know everybody does it and they put things on the wall that say like accountability, trust, right? But that's not really your values. Like you need something that really reflects in a genuine way who you are as an organization and what matters to your teams. And so the best advice Sarah gave me was don't build them yourself as a founder. Involve your team. Have your team build them, because your team are reflective of the values and the behaviors of the organization that you are today and that you want to drive. And so let them understand, let them get really proactive about it. And so we kept the values that we built back in 2017 are still the values today. I think we made one small change last year, but they have worked incredibly well. But I think probably the key thing beyond that, I think the thing I always struggled with as the business just got bigger and bigger and bigger is like, what do I do? Like, what is my role? Because it's like, yeah, you're the CEO. It's like, well, okay, but what does that mean? What do I do that's different? I think the thing that can be daunting, just being honest, for founders, as you start to scale, you start to bring in all of these leaders to own different areas I remember I was looking around thinking, these people are exceptionally good. Like they're all so good at what they do. They know like go-to-market, inside out, sales models, customer health scoring, engineering, and they're better than you at everything, right? And I think when I look back, I think I had this moment probably last year where I realized like, hey, all of these incredible people are here because of me. Right. And that's what my job is. Like my job is to inspire people to join this team. Like explain the vision, show people what we're building here, get them excited about them, make them want to be a part of the ride. And I think early on when I was trying to do this, I thought, there's this culture of like Silicon Valley inspiring founder and like, oh God, do I have to give inspirational speeches? Like I can't give inspirational speeches. That's not me. It's not about inspirational speeches. It's about being yourself. And it's about being really genuine because you are passionate about what your company does. Like I know I've always been passionate about the cloud. I know it's the future. I love the technology. So like that will show through in the right way. If you can spend the time articulating the reason that your company is here, and it'll take you, it probably took me 2 years to get that articulation really, really crisp and right, but continue to spend the time on it, iterate on it all the time, continue to test it. And you find, you learn what is the simplest distillation, like the core nugget of why your company exists and what gets people really rallied around and excited about it.
What's been your favorite stage as you've gone along, as you've gone from sort of micro doing everything yourself to doing sort of bits and pieces and pushing the rest out to the VP to now where you're sort of overseeing the whole ship? What's been your absolute favorite bit?
Sorry, could you say that again? It cut out while you were speaking.
Which phase has been your favorite part so far? The very early startup days where it's extremely scrappy, or sort of that middle part where you're searching for growth, or this later stage where you're really a very, very large organization?
That's a good question. They're good in, it's such a cop-out answer. They're all good in different ways. I love, like everybody loves the early stage building. It's hard. So I don't yearn for it again because it's so hard. But it's also extremely rewarding, I think. But when I think about the last 2 or 3 years and the skill set I've learned in managing a much larger organization and building an incredible team around me, like learning how to build organizational health and operational excellence is like a really important skill set. And so I feel like probably in the last couple of years, I've grown much more as a person. So the first couple of years are a grind and they're fun and they're exhilarating. But I think a lot of my personal growth has come from the last 2 to 3 years of the business.
And are you, how sort of thoughtful are you around going out and seeking ways to develop yourself personally as a leader in terms of mentors or courses or whatever it is? How do you level yourself up?
I do it through mentors. I don't take courses. I try. I'll read I've tried reading Harvard Business Review articles and all those kind of things that, and sometimes that can be helpful, but I find, this might just be me, but I find that I learn from people who've actually done it, who've sat in the seat and having a dialogue and going to them with real problems that I'm dealing with right now and learning how would they react to that? What have they done in the past? And what were the implications 3 to 4 years down the track? So I've had an incredible mentor, a guy called John Connolly out of Boston, 2 times founder, 5 times CEO. And he has been, like, I call that guy, it's like 3 a.m. for him and we'll have a phone call, right? I've done that many, many times with him. This is the issue I'm dealing with. And that to me is the best way of learning.
I know now you are very much giving that sort of mentorship back into the community now. You've been very public about getting involved in the early stage ecosystem and helping the next generation of startups come through, which is, I think what we all love about you, Sam. You are committed to giving back in that respect. And it's not just you. There are a ton of people in the organization now that have built up this huge institutional knowledge base. And I know many of them are doing exactly that. They're giving back to a lot of our founders and a lot of founders outside of our portfolio. It's fantastic to see.
Yeah, no, I'm very passionate about it. I know what it's like to sit in the seat and to face those issues head on. And I know how valuable it is to have mentors who've been there.
I want to end on a sort of a forward-looking note a bit, Sam. I know that that you've just recently sort of had a shift in your role as you've joined a part of a larger organization with plural sites, and we're very excited at Airtree to not only have a great return from the acquisition, but also to be continuing our investment in the larger organization. And we're very excited about the opportunity there. One thing that really stood out to me is that of all the money that gets spent on education globally, there's actually very few startups that have managed to break through and become edtech decacorns. I think there's really only two, maybe three private edtech companies worth 10 billion or above at the moment, and I think two of them are out of China. It seems this extraordinary opportunity to go and build something very, very large in professional training. What are you most excited about this connection?
Yeah, I think that's exactly why we decided I wanted to go this path, why I think this makes a ton of sense, why I'm very excited about it, is that like the edtech market is super fragmented. Like it's so fragmented. There is a learning solution company for pretty much anything you can imagine, right? And that's because customers care about depth and focus in their learning, right? So there's a class of customers that care about breadth. They want to, the one-stop shop. And most of those companies have been a mile wide and inch deep. And then there are a bunch of customers who care about depth in a particular area. And the thing I'm excited about in this combination is building the kind of the horizontal of the best verticals, if that makes sense. So combining breadth and depth. So giving us customers access to Cloud Guru, and you can come and you can get the best hands-on learning in cloud. And then for if your teams or your parts of your organization that want to go deeper on, say, whatever it is, coding or data science or all the different areas of IT, there is an in-depth focused solution for each area, which is like best in breed, and all that those offerings focus on. The people who make that is that world. They live and breathe that world the same way that we live and breathe cloud. So I think it's a very exciting time to build something like truly, truly valuable to customers and to the market. So yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun, and it's like the next stage for us.
I'm looking forward to it. We're just coming up to the top of the hour now, and just before I wrap up, Sam, and give you a massive thank you for joining us. Mel would kill me if I didn't make a special announcement for the second cohort of our Explorer program, which is coming up, and a lot of you will know about our Explorer program. We kicked it off last year. This is our way of trying to build the next generation of diverse angel investors in Australia. We think it's imperative for us in this ecosystem and in New Zealand to be able to build the next generation of tech companies like a Cloud Guru, that there are people in the ecosystem that are giving, like Sam, sort of giving investing their time and their money and their resources in helping that next generation. And so our Explorer program is a way to bring some of those like-minded people together, give them the tool sets and the network and the experience to start thinking about making those investments for the very first time. Mel's going to send around a link to that very shortly. I'm sure that we're going to wrangle you in, Sam, some way or another to come and help us with that. But I think it's going to be a fantastic program. So do please check out the link that Mel will send. And just to wrap it up, Sam, I just wanted to say a massive thank you. I've loved getting to know you over the course of the last years, and clearly we're thrilled for you for this latest set of news around the acquisition. Our investors are as well, and bear in mind, most of those investors are mums and dads who are investors in pension funds that are LPs. So you've really made a big difference in their lives as well, which is fantastic to see. And I just love the fact that you are so committed to giving back with your time and your energy back into the community and giving it forward. So thank you so much for coming on and joining us and sharing your story.
Thanks, James. I really appreciate it. Thanks for all your backing over the years. And, we can do this from Australia, right? We can, it's the people on this call that are going to do this. We're going to continue building an incredible tech scene in Australia. So yeah.
What a great note.
I'm joining.
To end it. Thank you so much for everyone for joining again, and stay tuned for our next Open Source Meetup. Thank you all.
Cheers all.
Bye.